Well, it's sure good to be with all of you and have another opportunity to study here in the book of Acts. Last time we were in chapter 23, and Paul was in the midst of a meeting of the Sanhedrin where they were questioning him and things weren't going well. So that's where we left off last time. Before we enter into our study, Brother Shelton, can you help us with an opening prayer, please? Amen. So, in this chapter, we have Paul's trial before the Sanhedrin here, and then the Lord is going to encourage him. There's been a lot of discouraging things happen since he's been in Jerusalem. And then the plot to kill Paul that is talked about at the end of the chapter. Thought we might read, since it's been over a week since we've had opportunity to study this, kind of read up to where we left off. It says, "And Paul looked intently at the council and said, 'Brethren, I have lived my life with a perfectly good conscience up to this day.'" So starts off trying to explain to them about his background and why he's there. "And the high priest Ananias commanded those standing beside him to strike him on the mouth." So he's not treated with justice or fairness at all as he tries to defend himself. "Then Paul said to him, 'God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. And do you set to try me according to the law, and in violation of the law order me to be struck?' But the bystanders said, 'Do you revile God's high priest?' And Paul said, 'I was not aware, brethren, that he was high priest. For it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people.' But perceiving that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, Paul began crying out in the council, 'Brethren, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees, and I am on trial for the hope of the resurrection of the dead.'" So Paul has perceived he is not going to get a fair trial. And all of us have to be wise. Look what Matthew 10, verse 16 tells us. He's talking to his apostles, but we ought to learn the same principle today. "Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, so be shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves." We have to be smart as we're out trying to teach the gospel. Everybody is not going to receive the gospel. Everybody doesn't have a good and honest heart. There's some of them that have that old hard heart that won't let the word in at all. Some people are like swine, and if you throw your pearls before swine, what's going to happen? It says that pig is looking for something to eat. He's not interested in pearls, right? So he'll turn and rinse you, right? He'll hurt you. And that's the way it is with people we try to go teach. If they don't want spiritual things, they don't want the truth we've got to bring, then it's time to just shut that down and go talk to somebody else. Because all you're going to get just trying to push the word on them is persecution for yourself, right? And Paul sees that right off here. He's a wise man. He goes, slap me on the face for trying to open my mouth. I mean, this is not going to work. So how can I get out of here? What is a snake good at? He's good at getting away, isn't he? You ever try to catch a snake? They're pretty good at avoiding danger and getting away. So we have to be like snakes. We got to be, when we see that the situation is dangerous and we're not going to do any good, it's time to get out of town. And that's what Paul does here. How can I get out of this to where everybody's not against me? Well, there's Pharisees on one side and Sadducees on the other, and they hate each other. I'll turn them on each other to where I can get out of here. That's really what happens. So he says, I am a Pharisee, which was true. He was raised a Pharisee. Pharisees believe in the resurrection of the dead. And the gospel's all about the resurrection of the dead, right? I mean, that's fundamental to Christians too. That Jesus was raised from the dead, and that guarantees everybody's going to be raised from the dead. So Paul shouts out and says, I'm a Pharisee. I agree with you on your fundamental doctrines that you teach. And that's the reason I'm on trials, because I believe in the resurrection of the dead. And he knows that's their big issue they have with each other, because the Sadducees don't believe that at all. So at least he's going to get part of them on his side a little bit to where he can get out of here. And we see just how wise his words are. And I don't doubt they were inspired words. You know, when they stand before a judge, Jesus promised, I'll give you the words you need, the wisdom you need. And it certainly works, because he gets out of here with his skin, doesn't he? And it doesn't look good when it starts off, that he's going to get out of this place alive. It says, and as he said this, there arose a dissension between the Pharisees and Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. For the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, and nor an angel, nor a spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledge them all. So we have these two groups there, and he's now already right off the bat prevented a unanimous vote against him, because he's got one group arguing for the resurrection, at least, that there is such a thing as resurrection from the dead. And he knows that they kind of get together to get a common enemy, but they don't like each other, the Pharisees and Sadducees. It's like if you were, I guess, going into Congress, and it looks like everybody in the Congress is upset with you. You'd at least want Republicans or Democrats, one, to be on your side a little bit, right? And that's what he does. They hate each other, so he turns them on each other by what he yelled out there. And so they start arguing about their big thing they disagree about resurrection from the dead. And they start debating that problem between themselves, and they forget all about Paul. Shows how just radically partisan people can get. And we see it in our politics today. It's really bad. And it was happening back then among the Pharisees and Sadducees. And as he said this, they have this distinction in the Sadducees. It tells us about their background. You know, we don't know a lot about the Sadducees. They're mainly priests. High priestly family were Sadducees. They were the aristocrats. They had been greatly influenced by Greek philosophy and trying to get favor with the Greeks back between the Old and New Testament. That's where they came from. And the party against them that was all against Greek ways and any of these foreign ways was the Pharisees. So they had been fighting each other for several hundred years, that they've been enemies. And Paul just throws a match out there and starts the fire here by saying that. This is what Josephus says about their beliefs. It says, take away the belief of the immortal duration of the soul and the punishment and rewards in Hades. And he also said in another place, the doctrines of the Sadducees is this, that the soul dies with the bodies. So they're materialists. They don't believe in life after death. That, and we don't know all the details about what the Sadducees believed. But if you don't have a soul surviving death, then certainly that soul doesn't need a resurrected body. So, they were arguing against a resurrection. And they didn't believe in angels and spirits either. Maybe they thought they were just created for the moment for God to use or whatever in the Old Testament when you read about one, that they're not actually independent beings that live on. I don't know I don't understand everything about their doctrine, but I know they denied these spiritual things. So they're just thinking about this world. That's where their focus is. And we got a lot of people like that today, don't we? Yes. Right, absolutely. And, it is, I don't think Paul's doing anything immoral or wrong. Obviously, this is a perfectly legitimate way to get somebody at least favorably disposed towards you to point out the things you agree with them on. If I'm studying with somebody that's an Episcopalian, I can say, well, we're Episcopalian too. We believe elders should be, in the church. You should have elders. Episcopalian, I got that backwards. Episcopalian, you'd say, I believe in bishops, right? We believe in overseers. We got bishops in the local church, right? Presbyterian, you'd say, I believe in elders, right? That's a Presbyterian. Or a Baptist, I could say, I believe in immersion. I think that's the right way to go. I agree with you on that. Adult baptism is what we have to have. So far, I agree with you on one of your fundamental things that you believe in. Now, what we're being baptized for, we got some discussion on that, right? And go from there. But it's certainly, there's a sense in which I could say I agree with the Catholics. There's a universal church. There's one church, right? Right. So it's a wise, tactful thing. It's a technique for all of us to use it, as we meet somebody, try to get them on our side and talk to them and try to lead them from there to where, where they need to be. You start where somebody's at and you try to lead them to a full understanding of God's word from there. And so Paul not only causes a problem here, but what he's saying is true as far as it goes. As far as it goes, I believe in the resurrection, right? And you guys think that's really important. And certainly those Sadducees don't, right? And so they look how out of hand things get. I don't know God's providence is a wonderful thing. We don't know what all led up. I don't know if they'd been having a bunch of problems with each other immediately before Paul happened to come in, or what, but it didn't take much of a spark to set off a big problem, did it? I mean, he just, God was on his side that day, because look how out of control they get. It says, and there arose a great uproar, and some of the scribes and the Pharisee party stood up and began to argue heatedly, saying, we find nothing wrong with this man. Suppose a spirit or an angel has spoken to him. They so want to get those Sadducees that they forget about Paul, and they actually start agreeing with him. Maybe he did see somebody on the road. It was a spirit. Maybe it was an angel. You guys don't believe in that, but we do. So, amazing. It's kind of amazing that they would get that out of hand, but that's exactly what happens to save Paul. And the Roman commander standing there watching all this nonsense about how these people are so upset with each other. And it says there was an uproar, an outcry. They're shouting and yelling at each other. And this is the Supreme Court building. They're shouting at each other. And fist fights are breaking out, it sounds like. It says they were arguing heatedly. It means to fight it out, back and forth fiercely. And so Paul's just he just dropped a bomb in the middle of this place. And again, just, there's a lot of obviously pent-up anger between these two groups, and it doesn't take much to set them off. And as a great dissension was developing, the commander was afraid Paul would be torn in pieces by them, and ordered the troops to go down and take him away from them by force and bring him into the barracks. Here he's responsible for this Roman citizen, and he's brought him out here to try to find out what charges do these people have against him. And Paul says one thing, and boom, the whole thing erupts, and everybody's fighting over Paul. He thinks they're going to tear him to pieces like a bunch of wild animals tear up an animal. I guess the Pharisees were pulling him one way, and maybe some other people were pulling him the other. And he goes, send the troops in. We got to get this guy out of this place. And can't let a Roman citizen get beat to death right here in the middle of the council. And you just have to feel sorry for this Lysias, the commander. I mean, he's tried everything he can to try to figure out why everybody's got such a problem. I almost wonder, how long had he been in Judea before he got into this mess? Because he doesn't seem to really understand much about the gospel and why they would be so upset with him and everything. He's trying to figure it out as he goes. And nothing is becoming clear as to why they get so mad every time Paul opens his mouth. But on the night immediately following, the Lord stood at his side and said, take courage, for as you have solemnly witnessed to my cause at Jerusalem, so you must witness at Rome also. Now, if the Lord made an appearance to Paul and tells him to take courage, what does that imply necessarily? He was pretty down, don't you think? I would be, wouldn't you? You come to town, you want to help your people, you want to be able to save people, and you get beat up in the temple on a false charge, and now you've been thrown in jail and people are trying to kill you, and you had this big plan to go to Rome and to preach in Rome and to help the church at Rome and then go to Spain. And now you're locked up in jail, and there's no light at the end of the tunnel right now, is there? It's like, well, my plan about going to Rome is gone. My plan about going to, this is it, this is the end of the road. And at that time, then the Lord appeared to him in a vision and tells him about the future, and that there is going to be a future that's going to be, it's all going to work out to where he gets to Rome. He's going to reach his goal that he had set. Wouldn't that be a great encouragement to you? Jesus oftentimes said in the book of Matthew and John for people to take courage. So this is just like the Lord in the flesh when he was here. He says the same kind of thing to Paul. And he had promised on the road to Damascus that he would appear to him with different truths, right, and reveal things to him. And here's an example of that. And it says, you're going to get out of this, and you're going to go to Rome, and you're going to be able to bear witness for me in Rome. You're going to preach the gospel in Rome. Now, that's encouraging. Doesn't that make all the difference when you can see that there is a light out there at the end of the way, that this may be difficult, but in the end, it's all going to work out, right? And that should be our attitude towards life, isn't it, really? Because we know in the end, God calls all things to work together for the good of our soul, and it's all going to work out. So Paul's reminded of this, it's all going to work out. Right? At least in an earthly sense, he had things he still wanted to do, you know? And it's like if somebody comes in and tells you you're going to die tomorrow, I'm sorry. We'd have to reconcile our thoughts with that. Well, we'll go to paradise. But whatever plans we had to try to help the church or help our family or do any of those kind of things, we'd be disappointed that, well, I'm not going to get to do that. You know, Paul wanted to do some other things before he left this world, I think, and that he thought were really useful and good that he needed to do. But, you know, the things I try to take out of it for ourselves as, you know, Paul wasn't a superhuman. He was a human like us, and he could get down just like we can get down. And the Lord gave him words to pick him up and gave him hope. And that's, of course, we can do that for each other. We can be that source of comfort like the Lord was. And also look at the way he responds to, you are going to go to Rome. But he doesn't take that, okay, you are going to get to Rome, as like, okay, I don't have to do anything. No, I'm going to work as hard as I can to do everything I got to do to get to Rome. And the Lord's going to help me. That's the way the Bible always deals with people. You think about Joshua when he was going to go in and take the land. Be courageous, you're going to take the land. But he sent in spies, he organized his army. He did all the stuff that any soldier should do that wants to be successful, and the Lord helped him. So we have promises given to us, but we got to cooperate with God and do our part, you know, to make those prayers get fulfilled and those promises to be answered. And Paul was that way. He's going to do all that it's in his power to get him to Rome and cooperate with God's providence. But it is encouraging to know if I do my part, you know, we're going to get there. You know, God's working with me, and He says I'm going to go. So this is all going to work out one way or another. But he continues to try to do all he can to get there. Then, right after the Lord has promised you're going to get there, you find out about a plot that looks like, well, how in the world is he ever going to get there with this plot? And it's a pretty good plot to take his life. It says, and when it was day, the Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves under an oath, saying that they would neither eat nor drink until they had killed Paul. And they were more than 40 who formed this plot. Now just think about, that's a pretty powerful conspiracy, isn't it? And you got some determined men. Nothing is more important than killing Paul. Eating and drinking is not important. Our single focus is we're going to kill this man, and we're going to get him, there's 40 of us. If there's 10 guards there, we're going to overpower them and kill him. We're going to kill Paul. That sounds like it might work, right? There might just be one guard with him. And you got 40 guys? It doesn't look good for Paul. It's all a secret. It's going to take the Romans and Paul off guard to know about this. So they put themselves under an oath, a curse. Woe unto us, and more so if we don't kill Paul, right? So they're asking God to punish them. That's what putting yourself under an oath is. If I don't do what I say, we're going to kill Paul. And that's going to be the number one thing. And it looks like it is a great chance this could work. And then this makes it even worse. And they came to the chief priests and the elders and said, we have bound ourselves under a solemn oath to taste nothing until we have killed Paul. Now, therefore, you and the council notify the commander to bring him down to you, as though you were going to determine his case by a more thorough investigation. And we, for our part, are ready to slay him before he comes near the place. He's got the Supreme Court on his side. How corrupt are these men? When you see that God's going to destroy Jerusalem and destroy the temple and destroy... You know, before the flood, they were only evil continually, right? All the intentions of their heart were wicked, and God destroyed the world, right? Doesn't it sound like this Jewish nation, the top leadership is so corrupt that they're going to take a man and go along with these cutthroats, these terrorists that have bound themselves to do this unlawful killing, that they're going to approve that. They go, okay, yeah, sure, we're down for that. We'll ask the commander to send him over. So, oh, you don't have to worry about you being involved because we'll kill him before he gets here. But they're approving of it. Not only they killed the Lord Jesus on trumped-up charges and rush that through and persecute the apostles, now look what they're doing to Paul. I mean, it's like the wrath of God is just building up against these people, and it's going to come down. It makes me think of those when Jesus would say, you know, this perverse and wicked generation. He said that a lot. And Peter said that on Pentecost, right? Save yourself from this perverse generation. They were perverse, weren't they? Crooked as you could be. Yeah. You notify them, you send the thing over. When we bring Paul out, they will catch them off guard. They won't know. It shows, you know, that their attitude is the ends justify the means. If we gotta break the law and ambush this guy and kill him in an unlawful way and not give him a trial or anything, well, that's the greater good for us. So we'll go along with these conspirators. Later on, these same kind of guys are going to be killing the Sadducees. I mean, you know, you got these assassins. They're working with the assassins. And later on, the assassins are going to be after them. You want to feed this beast? Like you read about people working with the mafia or whatever. You know, well, it's expedient. Let's get the mafia to help us take out our enemy. Well, later they're going to come take you out, right? That's once you lower the standards and we don't have to follow the law anymore, we can just do stuff directly the way we want. But you know, God is going to save Paul. It looks like, man, this plan's going to work. Because the commander's not going to know. He's going to just send Paul over there. He's wanting the information so bad. They say, we're going to investigate it more carefully this time. So send Paul back over. Don't you think Lysias would have said yes? It sounds like there's no way this is going to fail. But look how easy it is for God to save Paul. You know, that's the reason we pray and we trust God and trust His providence. Even when we don't see how things could work out in our life right, God can fix it, like simply. You know, one person overhears something. That's all it took. Somebody overheard the plot and it got back to Paul. That's all it took to short circuit the whole thing. It says, but the son of Paul's sister heard of their ambush and he came and entered the barracks and told Paul. Well, I think kind of encouraging that Paul lost everything when he obeyed the gospel. But it sounds like he's got one sister left, right? At least there's somebody in the family still standing by him that's willing to go tell people. So, yeah, I guess he didn't lose every member of his family when he chose to be a Christian. And isn't it good to have a sister and her son that care enough that they would come and warn him, you know? Paul had a lot of old Pharisee friends, a lot of old connections. He used to be their ringleader at one time. So you could see where his family would know people that, you know, might have overheard this. And he's able to warn Paul, you know. And again, I can't explain exactly how God got him in the right place at the right time, but God does this kind of things through natural means, without a miracle. That's what providence is. That's how He can answer prayer and stuff without doing a miracle. And He delivers Paul through a natural means here. Guy overheard something.